It's time now to check in with our Swissnex colleagues from around the world. And on this month's edition of Tech Talk, we are heading to India. Actually, in this case, India has come to us for a change. I don't have to do the interview via Skype. I'm joined now by Swetha Suresh of Swissnex India. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're head of innovation partnerships and lead for health tech projects. So I think I know where that conversation is going. But tell me, in general, what were you hoping to achieve with this visit?
So Swissnex actually works mostly bottom up. So we facilitate university collaborations, help these startups with their India market entry. And so these are all requests that more or less come from Swiss university researchers or from Swiss startups. But at the same time, for this bottom activities to flourish, we also need support of the governments from both the sides, and which is why through this visit I actually have the pleasure of accompanying the principal scientific advisor to the Prime Minister of India for exchange with the State Secretariat for Education, Research, Innovation and other innovation agencies like InnoSwiss, so that there could be possibilities for stronger bilateral cooperation.
And we'll look forward to speaking with him later on. But first, let's stay with you and what Swissnex India is focusing on. Some major themes are energy. Everyone is focused on energy. Digital, life sciences, and health tech. Tell me, why focusing on health tech and why now?
So now we think that it's a very good time, because if we look at India, for example, we have the world's largest public universal healthcare scheme that's been rolled out. So which means that the spending in the public health is likely to go up from 1.4%, which was in 2018, to about 2.5% in 2025. At the same time, healthcare delivery is not just done by public institutions, it's also done by private organizations. And there the market is steadily forecasted to climb to about $280 billion in 2022. So this is a very big market. Same time, at Switzerland, what we essentially see is the costs of healthcare per unit person have now exceeded 10,000 Swiss francs or $10,000. And there is also a necessity, given the age demography, to bring this down. So we really want to take the Swiss quality to the Indian market. Now the dual advantages are that Swiss startups get the scale. At the same time, they are also forced to be more cost effective, and these technologies can benefit both the countries. So which is why health tech is a topic of focus, and we see that for the scale, if we even go further down into digital health, it's quite easy, comparable to other kinds of technologies in healthcare, to achieve that scale quite rapidly in this given changing digital world. I think speed is also of essence.
And how do you see these Swiss startups that you're talking about? How are they moving forward in India? Is it challenging for them? How are they making their way?
So I can just give you a few examples of startups that have really worked in the Indian ecosystem and what they are doing. So we had a startup who was into repurposing hospital tools very quickly, and also had a portable sterilization unit. And essentially they could validate, and they could also get a lot of feedback from India, wherein the conditions overall are quite conducive, whereas in Switzerland you're probably not able to get that critical feedback for the device. And the good news is that now they are C certified, I believe, and they can go into different markets. While more recently we also have Swiss startups that first came to validate the market to see whether their product would have an interest in India and so on, but they realized that development also of a certain piece in India, utilizing the expertise which is there, is beneficial. So they do a part of the product development in India, while their primary intended market first is still Switzerland.
As promised, we're joined now by the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister of India. He is Professor VijayRaghavan. Thank you for joining us, Professor.
Thank you.
Now, you're here in Switzerland with a scientific delegation, and you've been, as I understand it, in roundtable discussions on digital health in Basel. You've been on a workshop on mountain research in Bern, where we are currently. So a broad range of topics. For you, what was your overall goal in coming here? What were you hoping to achieve?
Well, Switzerland is extraordinarily impressive in Europe as a country where its investment in science and technology has paid off disproportionately highly. And that's a lot to learn from Switzerland. Switzerland has also been a partner with India for many, many years. And Indian science and technology is also deep. And there are complementary things for each other to learn from and do together. So it's been really great. Yeah.
Now, from what you've seen, how do you think that Switzerland and India can collaborate further? I mean, how can we move forth in things like digital health or mountain research or innovation?
You know, one of the very interesting statements I've heard, at least in 2 locations in our discussions here, is a worry which our Swiss colleagues have. And I don't think it's a well-founded worry, but they do seem to have it, which is they seem to think that they have a lot of resources, they have a lot of science and technology and capabilities, and they wonder whether they're getting complacent. I don't think they are, but they think they are getting complacent. And in India, you have an extraordinary energy and a desire to do things quickly. And we also have significant capability, but clearly the kind of depth in technology and science which is there in Switzerland is different, and those are the areas we need to also develop. So there's a great chance of doing things together because there's a substantial fire in the belly in India, and there's a substantial capability and a desire to collaborate in Switzerland.
And what about this issue of brain drain?
There has been, over the last several decades, a substantial number of people, young Indians, going abroad and doing extraordinarily well abroad. But simultaneously, what's happened over the last 10 years or so is India has opened up with enormous opportunity. Indians abroad have done really well, so that's on one side. And on the other side, the new science and technologies today are data-driven, algorithm-driven, and link these two into the Internet of Things. And this is where Indians are excelling. So the so-called brain drain of the past has become a brain gain, with people coming back in large numbers. And people who are in India today are contributing to design of semiconductors, of components all over the world at the highest level. So there's a great opportunity for Indians based in India also to contribute to the global economy and to the Indian economy.
Okay. Earlier, I was speaking to Swetha about her area of specialization, which is health tech and digital tech. Talk to me about India's strengths in these sectors.
So what's happened over the last 5 years or so is a massive takeoff in the startup and innovation ecosystem, of which the medtech has been a major part.
What has driven that?
Well, what has driven that is the government's injection of resources and incubators and support for startups, both directly and in terms of tax breaks of various kinds. This, combined with India's large young demography, about 60% of our population is very young, has allowed this entrepreneurial zeal to go ahead. This has posed both great opportunities and challenges. So these new devices, technologies, e-commerce has resulted in extraordinary success in some areas, e-commerce particularly, in certain technologies which have been commercialized in a variety of different ways, and also in medtech. And now the challenge is that can we get these successes into the market, not just globally or in the elite affordable space, but also in our insurance schemes on a really wide scale. And that's what's happening. So India will be a very large market, both for its innovative medtech, and also it'll be a source of export globally.
And how will the government be supporting?
Well, the government
this
is
ecosystem?
supporting this ecosystem in three ways. One, as I said, is by directly supporting the entrepreneurs through incubation facilities so that they can come up. The second is by having policies which enable startups to get into the procurement system with their policies and so on and so forth, with their innovations. So the procurement policies are geared to help startups nationally and globally. And thirdly, to make import and export regimes easier so that startups are globally competitive. Right now, the situation is that we could import assembled components at much less cost than startups could import the components and assemble and market, because the tariff structure was skewed in a way where the tariffs on the components were higher, whereas the tariff on the completed product were lower. And that skew has now been corrected. So both global and national companies can compete on making the most frugal innovations for the Indian market.
So in the case, you touched on this a little bit, but in the case of Switzerland, so the productivity of the Swiss life sciences industry is unrivaled compared to other top locations around the world. Now, Switzerland also holds a leading position when it comes to capital procurement. What kinds of investments is India making in this sector?
Well, Indian industry in generics, pharma, biotech are doing extremely well worldwide. I think 2 out of 3 vaccines given to every child in the world are made in India. So that's phenomenal. But Indian companies are successful at the lower end of the value chain. They are not at the cutting edge of innovation. And the reason is they have capital, but they don't have risk capital. And that's because they have to compete with large pharma companies all over the world who have enormous capital. I mean, the R&D budget of a big pharma company would rival that of the US National Science Foundation, for example. So how does one compete in this situation? And Indian companies now are partnering with Indian laboratories in the R&D sector in truly innovative space, not directly competing with the big players, but trying to develop a more innovative, laterally different, truly imaginative research agenda. I think that's good move. It'll help the world in general, and it'll help Indian companies to get into the truly innovative space.
And does the government have to also fund more?
Well, I think
invest more, or?
Well, the government is investing a lot, but it needs to invest a lot more, and we're doing that. The government investment right now is substantially into centrally funded laboratories and institutions. It needs to go substantially more into the state funding institutions, and industry investment and research also needs to go up. It's rather small right now.
Just to finish up then, 2 messages. One, what would you tell the young people, young Indians? What kind of advice would you give them who are looking to get into technology, into science, into startups? What would you say?
Well, so far, over human industrial history, people who have been adventurous have looked to create wealth for their immediate neighbors or for the world at large at best. Today, our job is to create wealth not only for all of us who are here today in this world, but also for our future generations. And therefore, the factoring in of the costs of science and technology and innovation and development in terms of future costs needs to come in. When we do that, we both are very inventive in doing frugal things correctly now, and we also look after our future generations. And that's very important given the state of our planet.